This keyboard isn't just an upgrade. It's the next generation of one of the most popular keyboards out there, and it marks a huge step forward for low-profile mechanical keyboards. We're talking about this, the NuPhy Air75 V3. In the past year, competition in this space has exploded, and NuPhy took some big swings with this latest model to try to stay ahead of the competition. We'll dive into every change they made and see if it's a home run or not. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name's Cameron, and I'm dedicated to bringing you detailed tech reviews in plain English. If you find this review helpful, a like, comment, share, or hitting that subscribe button are all awesome ways to show your support. Full disclosure, NuPhy sent this keyboard over to me for review, but they had absolutely no say in my coverage. They also provided you with an exclusive discount code, so you can use code Cameron to save $10 off your order if you decide that this is the right keyboard for you. You'll find a direct link in the video description. So now with that, let's jump in. Starting with the build and design, this keyboard unfortunately feels a bit like a watered down version of NuPhy's style. That's a bummer for me as someone who has loved their previous designs, but it's understandable as this version should be a bit more widely appealing. For the first time on the V3, you don't have multiple colors of base keycaps, like the white and gray combination or the black and gray combination. You also don't get the iconic yellow spacebar and other large keys with bright accent colors that we've previously come to expect. Instead, you get a few small, colorful keys across the top row, but even for those, you can swap them out entirely with extra keycaps that are in the box and ultimately leave yourself with just a complete white keyboard with a silver case and nothing more. A bit boring, but it's a clean look, which I'm sure many people out there will absolutely love. Outside of this white model that I've got, there is a black version with a black aluminum case, which looks equally as clean. This Air series keyboard is still a low-profile mechanical keyboard. However, despite what the website says, it's actually not quite as low-profile as their previous models. According to the site, the V3's front case height should be 0.3 millimeters lower than this black Air60 V2. I'd say it seems to be the other way around. Plus, if you factor in the switches and keycaps, the V3 is actually noticeably taller. Compared to my Air75 V1, it's an even bigger difference. So yes, this is still a low-profile keyboard, and it's still quite small, but not quite as small as expected, and not fully accurate with the advertised measurements, at least not relative to their other models. The top case is aluminum, much like before. They advertise it as a 220 grit anodized finish with a refined feel and a polishedness not found anywhere. I call it smooth aluminum. It honestly feels about the same as the V2. It feels a bit softer, which I guess is just my mind interpreting the small difference in smoothness. I don't know why keyboard brands seem to be in an arms race for aluminum smoothness all of a sudden. iQnix touted 180 grit with their MQ80. Lowfree is calling out 205 grit with their Flow 2, and this is 220 grit. So I guess NuPhy holds the crown currently, but I sure as heck can't tell the difference. They're all just smooth. Beneath that super smooth aluminum top case is a clear ABS plastic bottom case. This plastic does feel noticeably softer and less hollow than the V2, which definitely helps when it comes to the keyboard sound, which you'll hear in a bit. The bottom still has the air feet with dual stage height adjustments, just like the V2. The branded metal plate is still there as well. And finally, NuPhy's ridged design that they incorporate across every product is here as well. The location where the top and bottom cases come together has a bigger offset than previous generations, making the top case appear a bit like it's floating at certain angles, which is pretty cool. The two also produce more of a wedge shape than before, resulting in higher typing angles across the board. With the feet closed, it sits at about 4 degrees. The smaller feet get to an angle around 7.5 degrees, and the larger feet bring it up to a very steep 10-degree angle. That 10-degree angle is really aggressive and feels very weird to type on for me. Traveling with this keyboard is totally viable just like before. Though it weighs slightly more than the prior generation, it's still fairly light. Mine came in at about 730 grams or 1.61 pounds. NuPhy has a new version of their NuPhyIO to protect this keyboard on travels, and as I mentioned, it still has those Air feet, which are NuPhy's specially designed feet which allow the Air keyboard models to sit on top of a MacBook Pro. These tiny rubber feet are perfectly aligned with the top and bottom of a standard Mac keyboard layout to make for an interesting alternative to your standard keyboard if you use a Mac. I'm personally a Mac user and I rarely use this feature, but if you're someone who wants this, it is far and away the best option out there since it works perfectly. Continuing on to the typing experience, there are a lot of changes to talk about, and I've got a typing test of each of the 3 switch options coming as well. But first, what remains the same are the keycaps. The size and shape are nearly identical, if not exactly the same as the V2. They have a great concave shape that is very easy to type on. They're made of double-shot PBT, which means that they should continue to hold up just like prior models. And finally, they use an excellent font, which I prefer over just about every other keyboard brand that I've ever seen. Truly, these are some of my absolute favorite keycaps. Moving beyond the keycaps, we start to find those differences. First, there's the switches. They're still hot swappable like before, but this board uses Gateron's 3rd generation low-profile switches, which are commonly referred to as Nano Switches. They're the same ones that were introduced on NuPhy's Kick75 keyboard, so they are cross-compatible with that model, but importantly, they are not compatible with the older generations of the Air lineup. They've also slimmed down the switch options when ordering, giving you just 3 to choose from rather than the 7 options available on the V2. The ones that are available are the tactile brown nanos, the linear red nanos, and the silent linear blush nanos. This means no more clicky switch options for those lovers of loud keyboards out there. If you decide to purchase some additional switches, there is also a linear silver nano available, but you can't get that one pre-installed for whatever reason, and I don't have a sample of that one to test, so that's the only one that I won't be showing you guys today. Also, the keyboard is the same price no matter the switch you select, which is rare for silent switches. But if you decide to buy switches separately, those blush switches are more expensive. So if you're purchasing extra switches, make sure you just take note of that small savings opportunity. The remaining big changes are all internal. First is the addition of a gasket mount design, which allows the keyboard to flex as you press down and provides a softer, quieter, and less hollow feel. The top plate, which is the first material you'll find underneath those keycaps, has also been changed, moving from aluminum to polycarbonate, again helping to make the keyboard softer, quieter, and less hollow. Finally, there are even more foams and pads inside, once again, to help with sound absorption and the feel. The end result is really, really good. For specifics, let's start with what I figure will be the most common switch option, the red Nano Switches. These are linear switches, which are smooth, light, and have a crisp, poppy sound to them. These switches have a really nice pop to them. They're fun and satisfying to type on, but they are a little bit louder than I initially expected. When casually using the red switches, I didn't notice any pinging or other off-putting sounds, though if you lean in and listen really closely, you'll notice a couple of things. First, some of the switches do have a small bit of a metallic ping to them. This is really similar to what I noticed when testing the brown Nano switches on the Kick75 keyboard. While not impacting every single switch on the keyboard, some of these red and brown Nano switches wind up with an audible metallic ping sound. In this case, I wasn't able to notice it without specifically searching for it, but if you've got very sensitive ears, you might pick up on it just from normal use. If it does bother you, you can shift those impacted switches to areas of the keyboard that are used less frequently, or if you're really adventurous, you could consider modding the switches with some extra lube, which might help to counteract the pinging. The second thing I noticed with the red Nanos was that although they feel smooth, some have just slight inconsistencies. This is similar to the pinging. It's not super noticeable unless you are looking for it specifically or if you are just really sensitive to it, but some of the switches were much scratchier than others, ultimately just making for a slightly less consistent typing feel across the board. I do want to stress that for most people, you won't notice these specific things with the pinging and the scratchiness. But for those highly perceptive users or those that are very particular with their keyboards, I wanted to call this out. Every single keyboard and set of switches will have slight variations like this, which is expected, but it's good to know which type you're most likely to experience when going with each type of switch. On my Kick 75, after I isolated the pingy switches and moved them around to the outsides, I no longer had any issues personally, and it was a similar situation testing this. The brown nanos are the next one to cover. This is a tactile switch for folks who like a bit more feedback when you press your keys. It's slightly heavier to press, produces a louder sound, and is more thocky sounding if that's what you're into. Even though the tactile bump on these brown nanos isn't very pronounced, the switch itself is noticeably heavier than the reds, which is something to consider if you're worried at all about typing fatigue. The louder, thocky sound on the browns is still pretty quiet by most keyboard standards, which is nice. As I discussed in the previous section though, some of these brown nanos are susceptible to metallic pinging sounds, which you'll have to look out for. Finally, there are the blush switches. These are linear, silent switches that are quite different from the other two options. Overall, the browns and the reds feel like slight variations of the same switch. This one feels like something entirely different. The blush nanos feel soft and cushioned as you press on them. They're quiet, obviously, which provides the perfect solution for working in public places, around picky neighbors at work, or close to a sensitive microphone on a Zoom call. They have slightly less travel than the other two switches, though it's not really noticeable unless you're analyzing them side by side. They don't have any major inconsistencies that I was able to pick up on personally. There's absolutely no metallic ping, which is great because that can become very noticeable on a silent switch like this. And for smoothness, since they inherently have a bit more resistance because of the cushioning of the sound, even when switches were a bit scratchier, I didn't find them to be noticeable or nearly as annoying as on the reds. These switches are definitely my favorite. Overall, it seems like silent switches are a growing trend in the keyboard market. I've personally grown to absolutely love them, and as I said, this keyboard is no exception. They have a uniquely satisfying feel when using them that you kind of have to try firsthand in order to fully understand. My only other experience with silent switches was on the Lo-Fi Flow Lite, which I loved. The silent switches here are very similar, with the only real difference coming from the board itself. This board is more rigid in its design compared to the all-plastic Flow Lite. That rigidity makes this board feel a bit more sturdy and solid when you're using it. One is not necessarily better than the other. On the Lo-Fi, it felt unique because it was so quiet and so soft feeling. Here you have a solid and sturdy base with a soft and silent switch, which feels unexpected and therefore unique in its own way. So it really comes down to what you want personally. Across all the switches, this keyboard is pretty quiet with nice sounds and a great feel. It doesn't sound or feel hollow at all, which is a huge improvement over the previous generations. The spacebar is really good, even though, interestingly, they did away with the spacebar silicone padding used in their previous models. I guess they just didn't feel like it was necessary anymore. I tend to agree. The only real issue I have is with the red and brown switches being sometimes pingy and sometimes a bit scratchy. Other than that, I think that you can absolutely put this keyboard's typing toe-to-toe with the top low-profile keyboards out there today. Some would rate it at the top, some might prefer others. I know that folks in the comments are definitely going to want me to say which one is best, but they're honestly too close and the differences are too subjective for me to sway you one way or another. You should honestly go with your gut, not with my personal preference. I will, however, comment on the silent option. As it stands now, since the low free flow light requires you to order the silent Hades switches separately, this is the cheapest way to get a high quality, silent, low profile mechanical keyboard, and the design here compared to the all plastic design of the Flow Lite is superior in my mind. So I will confidently say that this tops my list if you want something silent. But we still have a lot more to cover to get the full picture of this keyboard, so don't go anywhere just yet, and make sure you consider hitting the like or subscribe if you're enjoying yourself so far. Moving next to the key layout and the all-new knobs, this is a 75% keyboard, which is the first one to get the new V3 treatment. I'd expect that in the coming months, we'll see an updated version of the Air 60 and the Air 96 as well to round out their whole lineup. This 75% model has 84 keys in a traditional ANSI layout with a full function row, a full complement of page up, page down, home, and end, plus a full-size set of arrow keys. It is a very solid setup overall. For the first time, NuPhy is going to ship this keyboard not only in this ANSI layout, but in ISO and JIS layouts as well, which has easily been one of the most requested changes I've seen in my own comments and on Reddit up to this point. This finally gives users of those other layouts a low-profile mechanical option outside of just Keychron. So I am sure that there are a lot of people out there who are thrilled with that news. Also new on the layout this time around is the addition of a rotary knob. Out of the box, a blank orange key is installed, which you can absolutely use if you don't want a knob. I actually really like this and the other colored keys because they're completely unmarked, allowing you to customize your keyboard and pick whether you want the colorful keys to be delete, insert, a full print screen, or some other random key or macro, all without the confusion of having a key wind up mislabeled after you change it. If you instead want to switch it up to a knob, there are two different ones included in the box as alternatives. You can install them with a small included screwdriver. The knob does volume adjustments by default, but can be customized in the NuPhyIO software. It has a nice click and a satisfying tactile feedback when you spin it, but it's also really unstable. I think that the issue is with the small black stem that the knob sits on. It's too short, resulting in a ton of tilt and wobble, and a knob that can really easily come off. The result is that the knob is useful, but it's not satisfying to use. It's definitely a bit disappointing, as this was a key selling point for this new model. The other low-profile knob wasn't included in my pre-production review unit, but will be included with production runs. As a result, I don't have any first-hand knowledge, but I expect that it would be less wobbly given the lack of height and the fact that it uses the same base with that same black stem as the taller knob. It hopefully will be a better experience overall. That smaller knob is also designed to be able to fit within the NuFolio if you decide to purchase one to take your keyboard on the go, so you can have it as either a key or a low profile knob when using it for travel. The Air75 V3 has north-facing RGB backlighting. It's not per key RGB as some competing brands offer, so you cannot create your own completely custom backlighting designs, but there are 20 different light features to choose from, and you can fully customize the color using the NuPhyIO software. Unlike what some early documentation stated on the website, there doesn't appear to be any smart backlighting which automatically activates when your hands approach. It's unclear how close this got to actually making it into the production unit, since this note from the website is the only thing that we saw, and it got removed pretty quickly after pre-orders went live. In addition to the regular backlighting, there are some slightly different side light bars on this model. These light bars have been on the Air series since the original version, but now they have individual LEDs rather than a single diffused strip. They are also slightly viewable from below through the clear bottom of the case in case you care about that. Specifically, there are 10 LEDs, which enables a battery readout using function +/. This lights up a corresponding number of LEDs to match the current battery percentage of the keyboard, which is useful. These lights also continue to serve as functional indicators for things like caps lock and wireless pairing. Outside of that, I found that the diffused light strip on the older models was a bit more pleasing to look at, so this honestly feels a little bit like a downgrade in my opinion, even though the battery indicator is useful. Next up is connectivity, which includes all the essentials. The keyboard works with Mac, Windows, Linux, Android, and iOS. There is a switch on the back to move between Mac and Windows modes, and there are extra keycaps included in the box to switch between operating systems as well. Also on the back of the keyboard is a power switch to go between off, wired, and wireless modes. The wired mode supports 1000 Hz polling, great for gaming, and uses the USB-C port on the back. My included cable is a USB-A to C, but the one that is included in the production boxes will be a USB-C to C, so that's a nice upgrade. When in wireless mode, you have 4 different connections available. Function plus 1, 2, and 3 are used for 3 separate Bluetooth 5.0 connections, which operate at 125 Hz polling rates. And function plus 4 is used for the included 2.4 gig USB receiver, which, like the wired connection, also supports 1000 Hz polling. The USB receiver also now has a storage slot in the back when it's not in use. The slot is handy, but it is a bit tough to remove the dongle. You've got to pry it out with your fingernails, which can be tough. And unlike the NuPhyIO model, which have a little rubber piece to plug that hole when the USB receiver is not in there, this one just sits vacant on the back of your keyboard, which isn't really the best look. Though some folks have had connectivity issues with NuPhy keyboards in the past, both on Bluetooth and 2.4 gig receivers, I had no issues with my testing. The USB receiver was paired out of the box and everything has worked seamlessly. For sleep to wake, the backlighting turns off after 6 minutes of inactivity, and the wireless connections go to sleep after 24 minutes. When waking back up from that deeper sleep, it does take a second to get reestablished. Thankfully, those lengths can be adjusted in the NuPhyIO software, or you can completely disable auto sleep using function plus the right bracket key. Now that brings us to customization and battery. Customization and battery may seem like an unlikely pairing for a section of this video, but on this keyboard, they are intrinsically linked. The onboard battery is 4000 mAh in size, which is the same as the prior generation. However, battery life is 1200 hours, which is more than 5 times what you could expect previously when running the keyboard without backlighting. So how do they make so much progress in just one generation? Well, it actually comes down to the customization software that this keyboard supports and the hardware required for that software. We first saw this from NuPhy on their Kick75 keyboard, where they sold 2 different versions, one offering QMK, an open source customization platform with lots of support across the keyboard community, and another version with NuPhy's own proprietary software called NuPhyIO. I think that if you polled most people, they'd tell you they prefer QMK over anything proprietary. I tend to agree. However, the reality is that the hardware needed for the QMK version uses considerably more power than the NuPhyIO one. So NuPhy had a decision to make. They could either support the preferred open source QMK and deliver a product that burns through battery much faster, or they could use their less power-hungry hardware along with their own internally developed software and get much more battery life. In this case, about 5 times as much. For the Kick75, they seemed to run a bit of an experiment, offering both for sale, with the NuPhyIO version being slightly cheaper, which would have allowed them to gather some information about customer preferences. I don't know what those sales details looked like, but now they've gone fully over to NuPhyIO for the Air V3, a keyboard which is likely to be much more popular than the Kick. So if you are losing access to QMK and VIA, is NuPhyIO any good? Well, overall, it's fine. It has most everything you would need from a customization software. It's web-based, so you can run it easily on Windows or Mac. It allows for key mappings plus custom macros. My only real complaint is that some of the symbols used are not clear. Oftentimes, the same image is used for multiple different controls without a clear identifier. This makes it much less user-friendly when trying to both understand what's been mapped and when customizing your own mapping. So if you like to heavily customize your keyboards, this will probably be frustrating for you, at least in the near term. Thankfully, most of the issues that I've seen can and hopefully will be fixed over time. If, on the other hand, you typically use your keyboard as is, straight out of the box, you get to enjoy way more battery life without any other real sacrifices. One last call out here is a reminder that those 1200 hours of battery life are with backlighting off, which is what allows the hardware and software efficiency to have an impact. Unfortunately, there's not any way to code yourself to more efficient use of LED backlights, so with the RGB backlighting on, the battery life doesn't get the same huge improvement, offering between 60 and 100 hours per charge, roughly the same as the prior model. For pricing, the Air75 V3 costs slightly more than its predecessor, coming in at $140. Whether that's from rising component costs, general inflation, or US tariffs making everyone have to pay slightly more, I don't really know, but I will say that $140 in today's market seems totally fair for what you're getting here. If you are early enough to catch this keyboard while it's still on pre-order, you can get free shipping, but if not, shipping costs can be a bit high. It tends to be about $20 to $25 today for me, depending on which keyboard model I put into my cart. Thankfully, as a reminder, you can save $10 on any order over $100 with code Cameron. So who is this keyboard for? Well, kind of everyone. It's a great everyday keyboard, really nice for typing, capable enough for gaming, good for travel, works on top of a MacBook if you like that, can sound great or be completely silent. There's not a lot of things that this keyboard can't do. For now, if you require a number pad, you'll have to wait to hopefully see a 96% model soon, but otherwise, this keyboard pretty much has you covered. As a recap of what we've discussed, here are the differentiators and deal breakers. On the positive side, the design is clean and minimal with simple black and white options. It has a bit less of that NuPhy character that we've grown accustomed to, but it's nice nonetheless. The typing experience is excellent, and there's an option for silent switches without having to pay extra. The internals are improved, including the addition of a gasket mount, which creates a softer, quieter sound and a less hollow feel. There's now a slot for the USB receiver to prevent losing it. There's switches on the back for power and for operating system switching, which means that you have fewer keyboard shortcuts that you need to memorize compared to other competing boards. There's excellent battery life, though really only with backlighting turned off. The air feet are great for their purpose if you happen to want to type on top of a laptop. And finally, there are ISO and JIS versions for the folks who have been clamoring for better options in those layouts for years. For potential deal breakers, this keyboard feels slightly less low profile than before, though it's certainly still small. The knob is a bit disappointing with how wobbly it is. There's fewer switch options and no longer any clicky switches available. And finally, it's NuPhyIO only, meaning there's no support for customization with QMK or VIA. So with all of that in mind, is it a home run or not? Well, it's obviously a massive home run for ISO and JIS users, and it's also an excellent improvement over the previous Air generations. Is it clear and away the best low-profile keyboard available? It depends. It could absolutely be perfect for you, but there are problems that we discussed, and with many other great options available or coming soon, it's impossible to make that generalization overall. Nonetheless, this is an excellent keyboard, the best NuPhy Air so far, and bound to be one of my favorite keyboards for a long time to come. Remember that you can save $10 with code Cameron on NuPhy.com. More great keyboard content can be found in this playlist here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.